All right, let's dive deep into the Dallas Cowboys mailbag and break down everything that's been buzzing lately, from draft strategy and free agency to positional value and trade rumors, all through that lens of raw, passionate football talk that makes the offseason just as thrilling as Sundays in the fall. Starting off, there's been a lot of conversation about what the Texans did with Derek Stingley. They decided to pay him early, and some people might be confused by that move. But the logic is actually pretty smart. By locking him in before the cornerback market explodes again, with guys like Sauce Gardner and Trent McDuffie soon to be up for new deals, they're essentially saving a boatload of money in the long run. What looks like an overpaying now might end up being a bargain a year from now. That's the nature of the NFL. Prices keep going up, and waiting around usually means you're paying last year's money in tomorrow's market. The Cowboys, for some reason, always want to operate with yesterday's numbers. And that's a strategy that can backfire if you're not ahead of the curve. Now, shifting gears to the running back situation in the draft. There's been this narrative that teams aren't taking running backs in the first round anymore, that the position has lost its value. And yeah, there's some truth to that in terms of long-term investment. But let's not kid ourselves. If there's a running back with elite talent, teams are going to take him. Last year felt like a bit of a correction, where teams realized, hey, if we can land someone like Saquon Barkley on a decent deal, that's a huge win. He can change games. That's a value pick, not a wasted one. And this year's class, it's deep, like really deep. So deep that it might actually lower the demand a little bit because teams know they can wait and still find quality later on. But someone's going to pull the trigger on Ashton Janney in the first round. He's just too good. You've also got guys like Trey Benson, Quinton Judkins, and Travion Henderson who might not sneak in the top 32, but could very well go inside the top 50. The talent is there, and that always finds a way to rise above positional value arguments when draft day rolls around. Speaking of talent, let's talk about the Cowboys' offensive line. There's a fan concern out there. People still want another lineman, maybe a defensive tackle or a cornerback, and honestly, you're not wrong. But looking at the front office moves, it feels like they're pretty much set on the offensive line unless someone intriguing falls to them on day 3. They've got their starting 5. Brock Hoffman is in the mix. They're high on Asim Richards. They went out and got Robert Jones. So unless there's an unexpected opportunity, they might ride with what they've got. The defensive tackle situation, though, that's a different story. This is a team that talks a lot about wanting to stop the run, and yet they haven't done much to address that. Signing Robert Jones is not enough. None of the defensive tackles they've got scream, run stuffer. You can't build your identity around controlling the line of scrimmage if you're not actually investing in that part of the roster. At cornerback, there's no debate. The Cowboys have to make another move. Depth matters. Injuries happen. And right now, it feels like they're one piece short. If a quality corner is on the board when they pick, it should be a no-brainer. And when it comes to free agency as a whole, grading the Cowboys so far, I'd say it's been average. Probably a B if you're being generous. For Dallas standards, maybe even an A+, but we're not comparing them to themselves. We're comparing them to the rest of the league. For me, it's somewhere in that B- to C+ range. They haven't made any huge splashes. They played it safe. But free agency isn't over yet, so there's still a window to improve that grade. Now, let's get into one of the juiciest topics, the idea of trading for Courtland Sutton. There's been buzz about this, and I totally get the excitement. Having a wide receiver locked in for the next 4 years, that's a big-time move, especially for a team like Dallas that's always been sniffing around for that next top-tier target. And let's not forget, they like Sutton coming out of college. But here's the thing. Why would Denver let him go? It just doesn't add up unless the Broncos are planning a full teardown, which doesn't seem likely. They'd need a serious offer, maybe even a first-rounder, to part ways with Sutton, and even then, they'd be left with next to nothing at wide receiver. Marvin Mims is talented, but they barely play him. Their depth chart would be bare. Honestly, it makes way more sense for Denver to extend Sutton than trade him. The Cowboys might want him, but this isn't Madden. Teams don't just give away talent for fun. Let's talk draft strategy again. One fan asked about possible trade-down scenarios. Could the Cowboys move back in the first round? Maybe, but it's tricky. You need a partner, and right now, it's not obvious who that would be. Pittsburgh could get aggressive if there's a quarterback they fall in love with, but outside of that, maybe a team like Atlanta or Arizona moves up for a defender they're obsessed with. But even then, it's a stretch. You got to ask yourself, if another team is willing to move up for a player, shouldn't you be interested in that same guy? That's the dilemma. The trade-down option sounds great in theory, but only if the value is right. Now let's talk about some draft targets. Tyler Warren, Ashton Janney, and Ted McMillan. What are the odds that any of them fall to the Cowboys in the first round? I'd say at least one of them will be there. But all three? That's a long shot. Janney's got too much hype, and teams like the Raiders and Bears are lurking. Even Carolina and New Orleans could be in a mix. Tyler Warren is a tight end, which always makes things unpredictable, but he could go earlier than people think. The Colts at 14 are a real possibility. And McMillan? That dude might not have elite athleticism, but he's smooth, fluid, and consistent. Some teams want twitchy receivers who pop on tape with quick bursts, but T-Mac brings a different kind of game. He's not flashy, but he produces. I still think he's the top receiver in this class, and I'm not overthinking it. Just give me good football players. That brings me to the whole falling stock talk that happens every year. Luther Burden, McMillan, there's always this moment where guys who were hyped early suddenly start slipping in mock drafts, and fans start panicking. But let's keep it real. Unless there's a medical issue or a serious red flag, don't overreact. Sometimes, teams just overthink the process. And the media hype machine doesn't always match what NFL front offices are actually seeing on film. The Cowboys' free agency might be slowing down now, though. At this point, it wouldn't be a shock if they're done making big moves until after the draft. They've already signed a lot of players. They're sitting at 74 signed contracts. With 10 draft picks coming, they're going to be tight on roster space. They could still bring in a name or two, but nothing major unless something unexpected opens up. And don't forget, just because the free agency headlines slow down doesn't mean the work stops. The board is being set. The calls are being made. Now's the time teams really start shaping their identity heading into the draft. And as we keep peeling back the layers on the Cowboys offseason, let's not ignore one of the biggest fan concerns that keeps surfacing. What's the plan at running back? There was a question floating around about Omarian Hampton going to Dallas at pick number 12, and man, that's a bold move. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Hampton a lot. He's powerful, productive, and clearly one of the top 2 backs in this class. But spending the 12th overall pick on a running back, especially when there are likely to be higher-graded players available at more impactful positions, that's tough to justify. It's not that Hampton wouldn't help. He absolutely would. But this draft is stacked in ways that allow you to grab a very good back later without giving up that premium draft capital. And when you think about the Cowboys' needs, you start looking at other areas where a pick that early could bring more overall value. Defensive line, cornerback, offensive tackle. These are foundational positions in today's game. Running backs, you love having a great one, but history tells us you can still win without spending huge on that spot. Now, let's pivot to some deeper draft talk. A couple of sleeper names have been getting attention in the fan mailbags, and if you're into digging for those 3 gems, this part's for you. Guys like Phil Maffa out of Clemson, that's a back who could slide a little and end up being a fantastic value. Kyle Williams, the wideout from SMU, is another one to keep an eye on. Not the biggest name, but smooth route runner, good hands, and brings that grit you want from someone fighting for a roster spot. Brandon Cahoe-Dixon out of Florida, an offensive lineman who might not have the hype but has the tools. Elijah Roberts, also from SMU, kind of a tweener on the defensive line. Not quite an edge, not quite a tackle, but disruptive enough to get real consideration late. And then there's Teddy Banyan from Cal, a linebacker who needs some polish, but flashes instincts and toughness that could make him a steal if he develops. The Cowboys love finding those kinds of players, guys with upside, raw traits, and the hunger to prove themselves. Another name that popped up in the conversation was Diggs, the defensive tackle. Some fans are calling for the Cowboys to go after him, but word is he's asking for something like $15 million on a 1-year deal. That's steep. Too steep, honestly. The Cowboys aren't a team that likes to throw that kind of money around, especially not on short-term contracts. Even the deals they gave guys like Dante Fowler were much more conservative. And sure, Diggs might bring instant impact, but the cap math and roster structure just don't support it right now. They've already spent a lot of their wiggle room, and they've got other priorities looming, like extensions for key players. Unless Diggs lowers that number significantly, it's probably not happening in Dallas. Now, shifting focus again, what's the deal with Ted McMillan? Some fans are starting to question him because of a little drop in his draft stock, and honestly, that kind of reaction is always a little premature. People start second-guessing prospects the moment they see a mock draft shift or a new name rise. But here's the reality with McMillan. He's still one of the most complete receivers in the class. Maybe he's not the twitchiest athlete, but he's smooth, tall, coordinated, and understands how to separate with his footwork and IQ. He's fluid in and out of his breaks, and he brings a level of consistency that coaches love. Sure, some teams might fall in love with more explosive guys, but that doesn't mean McMillan isn't elite. You don't have to be a human highlight reel to be WR1. He's not flashy, but he gets the job done at a high level, and in my book, that still makes him a top-tier option. Sometimes the NFL just overcomplicates things. They chase traits and forget tape. You watch McMillan play, and you see a future starter, period. The same goes for other receivers like Luther Burden. There's been some talk about him dropping too, and again, unless there's a medical red flag or character concern, the slide is probably just pre-draft noise. These guys get overanalyzed to death. Every little detail becomes a potential issue, and front offices sometimes talk themselves out of great players. But when the lights come on, talent usually rises. Burden, McMillan, even someone like Will Johnson, they've all shown they can play at a high level, and if the Cowboys have a shot at one of them, they shouldn't hesitate. Don't overthink it. Take the playmaker. Now back to free agency. Are the Cowboys done? Maybe not officially, but the chances of them making another big move before the draft feel slim. They're sitting at 74 signed players right now, and when you add in their expected 10 draft picks, that brings them up to 84. With a 90-man roster limit, there's not much room left to make additions unless you start cutting guys. And even then, the front office typically doesn't like bringing in new names just to churn the bottom of the roster in March. They'll probably wait things out, let the draft shake up the roster, and then see what's still out there in the market. There might be a few post-draft signings, especially to fill gaps that didn't get addressed, but don't expect any more signings north of $3 or $4 million unless someone really surprising becomes available at a discount. So, how many more free agents do I think they'll sign before the draft? Honestly, 0 might be the answer. 1 or 2 at most. They're focused on the draft right now, focused on scouting, finalizing the board, and running mock scenarios. This is the part of the offseason where the noise dies down, but the work ramps up. You're not going to see as many headlines, but what's happening behind the scenes is arguably more important. This is where rosters are really built. Not with splashy March signings, but with smart April decisions. And while we're predicting things, let's circle back to the running back class. I already mentioned Omarian Hampton earlier, and it's worth repeating, this class is strong. Hampton, Janty, Benson, Judkins, there's talent everywhere. And because of that depth, a team like Dallas can afford to wait. They can look at other positions early, knowing that they'll still have quality backs available in round 2 or 3. That's the beauty of a deep class. You don't have to reach. You don't have to panic. You let the board fall to you, and you take advantage of the value when it's there. The key now is patience. Trust your evaluations. Don't let social media panic or hype throw you off your plan. The Cowboys are in a decent spot, but the margin for error is thin. One bad decision can set you back. One smart move can elevate you. It's all about timing, discipline, and knowing when to pounce. And if you're a Cowboys fan still wondering what direction this team is going in, just remember, the draft is where you find out. That's where the vision becomes clear. The moves they make or don't make will tell you everything you need to know about how seriously they're taking this next step toward contention. Whether it's solidifying the trenches, adding a dynamic pass catcher, or taking a swing on a defensive playmaker, it's all about putting the right pieces together. And right now, the puzzle is still wide open. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. Picture this, the rumbling noise of a defensive line, but this time, it's not the usual suspects. What if one of the most dominant players in NFL history, Aaron Donald, could be returning to the field, this time in a Dallas Cowboys uniform? The idea seems almost too good to be true. Donald, fresh off his retirement announcement in March 2024, has left the game with a legacy that most players can only dream of. However, whispers in the football world suggest that the Cowboys, always looking to strengthen their defense, could be making a move to bring the 10-time Pro Bowler out of retirement for one more run at a Super Bowl. Donald's credentials speak for themselves. A 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, Super Bowl champion, and a fixture on the NFL Top 100 Players list for nearly every season of his career. But it's not just his on-field success that makes this potential move so intriguing. His leadership and experience could provide the Cowboys with the type of dominant presence they've been lacking on the defensive line in recent years. The Cowboys are no strangers to making bold moves, and with their Super Bowl window open, adding a player of Donald's caliber could tip the scales. As the rumors swirl, it's clear that Dallas is positioning itself for something big. The question now is whether Donald, who recently expressed feeling fulfilled in retirement, could be enticed back for one final chapter. If the Cowboys do manage to pull off this shock signing, it would not only electrify the team's defense, but send shockwaves across the league, as Donald's return would solidify the Cowboys as one of the most feared teams in the NFL. The stage is set. Now we wait to see if the greatest defensive force in recent memory steps back into the spotlight. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.